On the morning of October 7, 1871, 7 children in Chicago awoke to discover identical scars carved into their left forearms. Deep, surgical and freshly stitched with black thread, these wounds appeared overnight without explanation. The children had never met. They lived in different neighborhoods, slept in separate orphanages, and shared no common experience that could account for their matching marks. Yet each scar measured exactly 4 inches in length, positioned at the same angle, and bore the unmistakable precision of a trained surgeon's blade. What makes this case extraordinary is not merely the impossibility of 7 simultaneous identical procedures occurring across a city. It is the fact that buried beneath the ruins of the Great Chicago Fire, investigators would later discover evidence suggesting these children had been selected, catalogued, and marked as part of an experiment that began years before they were born. A case buried by fire, revived by unearthed evidence. This is the story of 7 orphans whose scars would outlive the flames that consumed their city. If you believe history hides forgotten horrors, you are not alone. The official records of this case were thought destroyed in 1871, but fragments survive in the most unlikely places. Before we descend into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe and comment with your city below. Some truths demand witnesses. Now, let us return to a Chicago that no longer exists, to uncover what powerful forces wanted permanently erased. Chicago in 1871 stood on the precipice of greatness and destruction. The city had exploded from a frontier outpost of 30,000 souls in 1850 to over 300,000 residents by 1870. Wooden buildings stretched as far as the eye could see, housing waves of immigrants seeking opportunity in America's fastest-growing metropolis. But prosperity cast long shadows, and in those shadows lived the forgotten children. Orphanages dotted the city like islands of desperation. St. Ignatius Home for Children, the Protestant Orphan Asylum, the German Methodist Orphanage, and dozens of smaller institutions struggled to house the endless stream of parentless youth. Street children roamed in packs, sleeping in alleys, surviving on scraps and cunning. The city's elite lived in magnificent mansions along Prairie Avenue, while children froze to death 6 blocks away. Into this world stepped 3 individuals whose lives would become inexorably linked by the events of October 1871. Dr. Elias Monroe served as one of Chicago's few qualified medical examiners, a position that required him to document the city's mounting casualties with scientific precision. Sister Agatha ran St. Ignatius with an iron will softened only by genuine compassion for her charges. Detective Joseph Mallory, a skeptical Irishman who had seen enough human cruelty to believe in nothing but evidence, would find his worldview shattered by what he uncovered. The chaos of rapid urban growth meant record-keeping was haphazard at best. Children appeared and disappeared from the system with little documentation. Births went unregistered, deaths unmarked. It was into this administrative void that something predatory had been operating, selecting its subjects with careful deliberation, confident that few would notice and fewer still would care. The great fire that would consume Chicago just days after our story begins would provide the perfect cover for erasing evidence. But fires, as we shall see, cannot burn everything. The first child was found at dawn on October 7, 1871, at the Protestant Orphan Asylum on West Van Buren Street. Mary Catherine Sullivan, age 8, discovered by the night matron during morning rounds. The woman's screams brought the entire staff running. Mary lay unconscious in her narrow bed, her left forearm wrapped in blood-soaked bandages that no one remembered applying. When the bandages were removed, they revealed a wound that defied explanation. The scar ran from 2 inches below her wrist to just above her elbow. It had been cut with surgical precision, the edges perfectly aligned and closed with 15 neat stitches of black silk thread. The wound was completely healed, showing signs of several days' recovery, yet every staff member swore Mary had shown no injury the previous evening. More disturbing still, embedded within the scar tissue, barely visible beneath the skin, were thin lines that formed what appeared to be symbols or markings. Mary herself remembered nothing. She claimed to have slept peacefully through the night, experiencing no pain, no disturbance, no memory of leaving her bed. The other children in her dormitory reported nothing unusual. though 2 mentioned strange dreams of being led through dark corridors by figures in white coats. Within hours, reports arrived from across the city. At St. Ignatius, 9-year-old Patrick McMahon was discovered with an identical scar. At the German Methodist orphanage, sisters Anna and Greta Hoffmann, ages 7 and 10, bore matching marks. In the basement dormitory of the municipal poorhouse, Thomas Henderson, age 6, lay unconscious with the same 4-inch wound. 2 more children living on the streets but occasionally sheltering at various charitable institutions were brought forward by concerned citizens who recognized the descriptions circulating through the city. 7 children. 7 identical scars. 7 impossible procedures that seemed to have occurred simultaneously across Chicago. Sister Agatha was among the first to recognize the pattern. Having worked with troubled children for 15 years, she possessed an intuitive understanding of trauma and its manifestations. What she observed in these children went beyond physical injury. They shared a peculiar detachment, as if some vital part of their spirits had been temporarily displaced. They spoke little, ate mechanically, and showed no curiosity about their mysterious wounds. More significantly, Sister Agatha noticed that all 7 children, despite living in different institutions, shared one common experience. Each had spent at least one night within the previous 6 months at a facility known as the Gellert Home for the Destitute, a private charitable institution that had operated on the city's south side until mysteriously closing in 1869. Dr. Elias Munro first examined the children on October 8th, expecting to find evidence of some shared traumatic experience or perhaps a ritual hazing among street youth. What he discovered challenged every assumption he held about the possibilities of medical science. The scars were identical not merely in appearance, but in their underlying structure. Using a magnifying glass, Munro observed that the symbols beneath each child's skin formed the same pattern, positioned at precisely the same angles and depths. The stitching technique was consistent across all 7 wounds, employing a specific surgical knot that Munro had seen only in the most advanced European medical texts. But most disturbing was Munro's discovery that the scars contained traces of a preserving agent, a chemical compound that prevented normal healing processes while maintaining the appearance of recovery. This suggested not only surgical skill, but also advanced knowledge of anatomy and chemistry that exceeded the capabilities of most practicing physicians in America. Munro's examination revealed another troubling detail. The children's pupils responded abnormally to light, dilating and contracting in patterns that suggested some form of neurological intervention. Their reflexes showed subtle but consistent alterations, as if their nervous systems had been systematically mapped and modified. Driven by scientific curiosity and growing horror, Munro began investigating the abandoned Gellert home. City records showed the institution had been licensed in 1867 under the management of one doctor, Wilhelm Gellert, described as a Prussian immigrant with credentials from European medical universities. The facility had housed between 30 and 50 children at any given time, drawing from the most desperate cases citywide. The Gellert home's closure in 1869 had been abrupt and unexplained. One week the institution was operating normally. The next it stood empty, its residents scattered to other facilities across Chicago. Dr. Gellert himself had vanished, leaving no forwarding address and no explanation for his departure. Munro discovered that Gellert had maintained meticulous records, far more detailed than those kept by other charitable institutions. These records, which Munro located in a storage facility on the west side, contained not only standard information about each child, but also detailed physical examinations, measurements, drawings of bone structure and musculature, and notes written in German that Munro could not decipher. Most chilling was Munro's discovery of a roster dated 1868, more than 3 years before the scarring incident. Listed on this roster were the names of all 7 children who would later be found with identical marks. Beside each name were notations in German, along with sketches of their faces and detailed anatomical drawings of their left arms, showing precisely where the future scars would appear. Sister Agatha, when Munro shared his findings, begged him to abandon his investigation. She had lived through enough of Chicago's darkness to recognize when something should remain buried. The children were healing, she argued. They were beginning to speak again, to show interest in their surroundings. Whatever had been done to them was finished. Pursuing the truth would only bring more suffering. But Monroe could not let go. The implications of what he had discovered suggested a level of premeditation and scientific sophistication that challenged his understanding of what was possible. Someone had been planning these procedures for years, selecting specific children, documenting their development, and waiting for the precise moment to execute their design. If you are still watching, you possess more courage than most who encounter this story. The next part of our investigation will take us beneath the streets of Chicago, into chambers where science and something darker converged. Share this video if you believe others deserve to know what history tried to bury. Detective Joseph Mallory had built his reputation on skepticism. In 15 years of police work, he had seen enough human depravity to inoculate him against supernatural explanations for criminal behavior. When Monroe approached him with theories about mysterious medical experiments, Mallory initially dismissed the doctor as another educated fool chasing shadows, but Monroe's evidence was compelling. The German records, the surgical precision of the scars, the impossible timing of the procedures, and most convincingly, the roster predicting which children would be marked years before the events occurred. Mallory agreed to accompany Monroe to the abandoned Gellert home, expecting to debunk the doctor's theories and close the case. The building stood on Harrison Street, a 3-story brick structure that had once housed Chicago's most desperate children. Boarded windows and a rusted sign were the only evidence of its former purpose. Monroe had obtained keys from the property owner, a businessman eager to sell the cursed building that had attracted no buyers since Gellert's disappearance. The interior revealed nothing unusual at first glance. Empty dormitories, a dining hall, administrative offices, all bearing the melancholy atmosphere of abandoned institutions. But Monroe's investigation of the German records had revealed references to a lower preparation area and observation chambers that appeared on no official building plans. In the basement, behind a wall that seemed structurally unnecessary, Mallory discovered a hidden lever mechanism. When activated, the wall swung inward on well-oiled hinges, revealing a staircase descending into darkness below the building's foundation. The hidden chamber below defied every expectation. Electric lighting, years before most of Chicago enjoyed such luxury, illuminated a series of rooms that belonged more to a modern hospital than a 19th-century orphanage. Surgical tables equipped with restraints occupied the central area. Glass cabinets contained medical instruments of a sophistication that exceeded anything Mallory had seen, even in the city's finest hospitals. But most disturbing was the collection of documents found in a fireproof safe built into the chamber's walls. Written primarily in German, with some passages in Latin, these papers revealed the true scope of Dr. Gellert's activities. Monroe, working with a German translator from the university, pieced together a horrifying narrative. Gellert had been conducting systematic experiments on the nervous systems of children, believing that young subjects offered the greatest potential for neurological modification. His theories, derived from cutting-edge European research, proposed that specific surgical interventions could enhance human capabilities, improve learning capacity, and even transfer memories between subjects. The scars were not random markings, but precisely placed incisions designed to access nerve pathways in the arm and hand. The symbols embedded beneath the skin were actually thin metal wires, positioned to conduct electrical impulses that could stimulate or suppress specific neurological functions. Each of the 7 children had been selected for particular characteristics, physical and mental traits that Gellert believed would respond favorably to his procedures. Most chilling was the discovery that the 7 children marked in October 1871 represented only the latest phase of Gellert's work. Earlier records documented similar procedures performed on dozens of other children over the previous 4 years. Many of these earlier subjects had not survived the experiments. Those who did had been quietly relocated to institutions in other states, their records falsified to hide their origins. Gellert's notes revealed a methodical mind pursuing what he considered revolutionary science. He wrote of backing from unnamed benefactors who provided funding and equipment in exchange for detailed reports on his progress. References to military applications suggested that his research had attracted attention from government officials interested in creating enhanced soldiers. The metal implements found in the chamber bore markings indicating manufacture in Prussia, shipped to Chicago through a network of intermediaries that concealed their ultimate destination. Gellert had spared no expense in pursuing his vision of human enhancement through surgical intervention. Mallory also discovered correspondence between Gellert and associates in other cities, suggesting similar experiments were being conducted simultaneously in New York, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. The scope of the operation extended far beyond Chicago, representing a coordinated effort to test the boundaries of human modification. On October 8, 1871, just one day after Monroe and Mallory made their discovery, flames began consuming Chicago's South Side. What started as a small fire in the O'Leary barn spread with supernatural speed through the dry wooden structures that dominated the city. Within hours, an inferno was racing toward the downtown area, consuming everything in its path. The Gellert home stood directly in the fire's projected path. Despite the danger, Monroe insisted on returning to the hidden chamber to retrieve more evidence. Mallory, convinced by what he had seen, agreed to help. They managed to save several boxes of documents and a few of Gellert's more unusual surgical instruments before the building was engulfed in flames. The Great Chicago Fire burned for 3 days and 3 nights, destroying over 17,000 structures and leaving 100,000 people homeless. When the flames finally died, the entire area where the Gellert home had stood was reduced to ash and rubble. No trace remained of the underground chambers or the evidence they had contained. Dr. Monroe disappeared during the fire's final night. His body was never found, though witnesses reported seeing him near the ruins of the Gellert home, digging frantically through the debris as flames approached. Some speculated that he had discovered additional evidence and perished trying to save it. Others suggested a darker possibility, that he had learned something in those final hours that cost him his life. Sister Agatha died when St. Ignatius was consumed by the fire. She had refused to evacuate, choosing instead to remain with the children under her care, who were too sick or frightened to flee. Survivors reported that she spent her final hours comforting the 7 scarred children, singing hymns as the walls burned around them. Her body was found the next morning, arms wrapped protectively around Mary Catherine Sullivan and Patrick McMahon. Detective Mallory survived the fire, but was officially discharged from the police force within the week. His superiors cited his obsession with unsubstantiated theories and his inability to maintain professional objectivity as grounds for dismissal. The report he filed about the Gellert home was classified and sealed, officially described as the ramblings of a man traumatized by the disaster. The 7 children were separated and relocated to institutions in distant states. Official records stated this was necessary due to the destruction of local facilities. But Mallory suspected a more sinister motive. Someone wanted to ensure these children would never be in the same place again, never able to compare their experiences or piece together what had been done to them. In the decades following the Great Fire, Chicago rose from its ashes to become one of America's greatest cities. The South Side was rebuilt with modern buildings and improved infrastructure. No memorial marked the location of the Gellert home, and few residents remembered the mysterious institution that had once operated there. But some evidence survived the flames. In 1923, construction workers renovating a building near the former site of the Gellert home discovered a buried metal box containing Dr. Monroe's personal notes. The box had been hidden in a foundation wall, protected from fire by several feet of brick and mortar. Monroe's notes, written in the days immediately following his discovery of Gellert's chamber, revealed details too sensitive to include in official reports. He had identified the specific chemicals used to preserve the scars and had decoded portions of Gellert's research that suggested connections to European occult societies interested in human experimentation. Most significantly, Monroe had discovered evidence that the 7 children were part of a larger selection process. Gellert's records indicated plans to mark 50 children in total, with the October 1871 group representing only the first phase of a much larger experiment. The Great Fire had apparently interrupted this timeline, forcing Gellert to abandon his work and flee the city. Monroe's notes also contained sketches of additional symbols found in the hidden chamber, symbols that matched markings discovered in similar underground facilities in other cities during the 1920s and 1930s. These discoveries suggested that Gellert's work had been part of a coordinated effort spanning multiple decades and numerous cities. In 1954, a researcher at the University of Chicago discovered a collection of German medical texts donated by an anonymous benefactor. Among these books was Dr. Gellert's personal journal, containing detailed diagrams of the human nervous system marked with the same symbols found beneath the 7 children's scars. The diagrams matched modern neurological maps with startling accuracy, showing an understanding of brain function that would not be achieved by mainstream science for another 50 years. The journal revealed Gellert's belief that specific nerve pathways could be modified to enhance human intelligence, physical capability, and even psychic sensitivity. His experiments had been designed to test these theories using subjects who would not be missed if the procedures failed. Orphaned and abandoned children represented, in his view, perfect test subjects for revolutionary science. More disturbing was Gellert's documentation of successful procedures. Several children had shown remarkable improvements in learning ability, memory retention, and physical coordination following his interventions. These successes had encouraged him to expand his work, leading to the plans for marking 50 subjects that were interrupted by the Great Fire. In 1967, a photograph surfaced in the archives of the Chicago Historical Society that would add new dimensions to the mystery. The image, taken during the Civil War, showed a Union Army medical tent where wounded soldiers were being treated. Among the patients visible in the photograph was a man whose left forearm bore a scar identical to those found on the 7 orphans. The soldier was identified through military records as Lieutenant Thomas Brennan of the 96th Illinois Infantry, wounded at the Battle of Shiloh in 1862. Brennan had reported that his arm was injured not by enemy fire, but during a mysterious medical procedure performed by an army surgeon he could not later identify. Like the orphans, Brennan remembered nothing about the procedure itself, only awakening to find his arm bandaged and healing. This discovery suggested that Gellert's experiments, or similar work by associates, had been ongoing for nearly a decade before the events in Chicago. Military records from the Civil War period contained several references to experimental surgical procedures designed to enhance soldiers' capabilities, though details were classified and remained sealed. The connection between military experimentation and the orphan scarring raised disturbing questions about the scope and purpose of Gellert's work. Had he been developing techniques for creating enhanced soldiers? Were the children test subjects for procedures ultimately intended for military application? The evidence suggested a systematic program of human experimentation that extended far beyond simple medical research. Further investigation revealed that Dr. Gellert himself may have been connected to Prussian military medical research. European archives contained references to a Wilhelm Gellert, who had worked with German army physicians developing techniques for treating and modifying wounded soldiers. This Gellert had disappeared from European records in 1866, the same year that the Chicago Dr. Gellert first appeared in American immigration documents. The timeline suggested that Gellert had fled Europe following the end of the Austro-Prussian War, possibly carrying classified research that he continued to develop in America. His work with Chicago's orphans may have been part of a larger effort to perfect techniques that could later be applied to military subjects. Modern analysis of the scarring technique, based on Monroe's preserved notes and the recovered surgical instruments, has confirmed the advanced nature of Gellert's methods. The precision of the incisions and the sophistication of the nerve pathway modifications exceeded the capabilities of most contemporary surgeons. Gellert was clearly working from knowledge that would not become standard medical practice until the 20th century. Computer modeling of the embedded wire patterns has revealed that they form complex geometric configurations designed to interact with specific neural pathways. These configurations bear striking resemblances to modern techniques used in neurological implants and brain stimulation devices. Gellert appeared to have anticipated developments in neuroscience that would not occur for another century. The 7 children marked in Chicago were never reunited, and most died without ever learning the full truth about their scars. Mary Catherine Sullivan lived until 1923, working as a seamstress in Boston and never marrying. She reported throughout her adult life that she possessed unusually vivid memories and could sometimes sense the thoughts and emotions of people around her. Patrick McMahon became a successful businessman in New York, crediting his exceptional ability to read people and predict market trends. Both Anna and Greta Hoffman demonstrated remarkable artistic talents that seemed to emerge suddenly in their teenage years. These enhanced capabilities, documented in letters and records preserved by their adoptive families, match precisely the improvements that Gellert had predicted would result from his procedures. The children's scars had not been merely marking them, but modifying their neurological functions in ways that would benefit them throughout their lives. Yet the cost of these enhancements remains unclear. Several of the 7 children suffered from recurring nightmares, featuring dark rooms and figures in white coats. Thomas Henderson developed a severe fear of medical procedures that prevented him from seeking treatment for illnesses throughout his adult life. The psychological trauma associated with their mysterious scars affected each child differently, but none ever fully escaped the shadow of their unexplained experience. The legacy of the 7 orphans extends beyond their individual stories. Their case represents one of the earliest documented instances of systematic human experimentation in American history, predating better-known examples by several decades. The sophistication of the procedures and the international connections suggest that such experimentation was more widespread and organized than previously understood. Modern researchers studying the recovered evidence have identified connections between Gellert's work and later experiments conducted by various government agencies and private organizations throughout the 20th century. The techniques developed in that hidden chamber beneath Chicago may have influenced generations of researchers interested in human enhancement and modification. The children themselves, scattered across the country and living under assumed names, became unknowing test subjects in a longitudinal study that spanned their entire lives. Their enhanced capabilities and persistent psychological effects provided ongoing data about the long-term consequences of neurological modification, though they never knew they were being observed. Recent discoveries have added new chapters to this story. In 2018, construction workers renovating a building in downtown Chicago uncovered a second hidden chamber, this one containing equipment and documents that had been sealed since the 1870s. The chamber appeared to be a backup facility, maintained in case Gellert's primary laboratory was discovered or destroyed. Among the documents found in this second chamber were detailed records of all 50 children Gellert had originally planned to mark. The 7 orphans who received scars in October 1871 were listed as Group 1, Phase 1 of a much larger experimental program. Subsequent phases would have involved different types of modifications, testing various approaches to human enhancement through surgical intervention. The documents also revealed the identities of Gellert's financial backers, a consortium of wealthy industrialists and European investors interested in developing enhanced workers and soldiers. The scope of the conspiracy extended far beyond Chicago, involving participants in major cities across America and Europe. The Great Fire had apparently disrupted only one small part of a much larger operation. Most disturbing was the discovery that the program had continued after Gellert's disappearance. Other researchers had taken over his work, refining his techniques and expanding the scale of experimentation. Records from the early 20th century document similar scarring incidents in other cities, suggesting that the Chicago orphans were merely the beginning of a systematic effort to modify human capabilities through surgical intervention. If 7 children could be marked by the same invisible hand in a single night, selected years before the procedures occurred, and modified with surgical techniques that exceeded contemporary medical knowledge, how many others were forgotten by time? How many enhanced individuals walk among us today, carrying scars that mark them as products of experiments they never understood? The evidence suggests that what happened to those 7 orphans in Chicago was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of human experimentation that may continue to this day. Modern advances in neuroscience and surgical techniques have made such modifications easier to perform and harder to detect. The line between medical treatment and human enhancement grows thinner each year. Consider the children you know, the adults you encounter, the unexplained talents and capabilities you observe in others. How many bear invisible scars from procedures they cannot remember? How many have been selected, modified and released back into the world to live as unknowing test subjects in experiments that span generations? The 7 orphans of Chicago represent more than a historical curiosity. They are evidence that the boundaries of human modification have been tested for far longer than we acknowledge, by forces with resources and ambitions that extend across continents and centuries. Their story reminds us that some scars run deeper than skin, that some experiments never truly end, and that the line between healing and harm is often drawn by hands we cannot see. History does not erase everything. Some scars resurface, carrying with them evidence of truths that powerful forces hoped would remain buried forever. The 7 orphans who woke with matching marks in October 1871 were not the end of something, but the beginning. Their legacy lives on in every unexplained capability, every mysterious scar, every child who demonstrates talents that seem to emerge from nowhere. Share your theories about what happened to those children, and more importantly, what continues to happen today. Look closely at the people around you. Some scars are meant to be hidden, others are meant to be found.